Okay, welcome to our panel. Thanks everyone for coming. This panel is called Using Spatial Reality Display in Virtual Production. I'm Nick Colsey from Sony. I'm moderating the panel, and I'm honored to share this stage with an amazing group of innovators and creators amongst the leaders, really, in the world of virtual production. They or their customers are all using the Sony spatial reality display in virtual production for pre-visualization and other applications. And we're going to explore how it has benefited their workflow. So let me start with introducing the panel. So first of all, stepping in at the last minute, Joe Finlayson from Media and Entertainment for Epic Games. Next, Evan Glantz from View Technologies. AJ Sciuto from Magnopus, Chris Holland from Scarab Digital, and Taisi Yamamura at Sony Electronics. So let's dive straight in. So first of all, Taisa, since there may be some people here who are not familiar with spatial reality display, can you tell us about this 3D display? And oh, where's my clicker? Next slide, please.
Right, yes. So spatial reality display is a glasses-free 3D display. It's a technology by Sony. There is a sensor in front of the display that senses the position of the face and the position of the eyes. And depending on the movement of the person in front of the display, it adapts the image for you to see in 3D without any special glasses or VR headsets. We have this combination of this sensor that tracks in real time and the micro-optical lens that is fine and thin, little lens seated on the top of the LCD screen that divides the image between the right and left eyes. So it can give you this stereoscopic viewing with the naked eyes. We do have an SDK that supports on Unity and Unreal Engine. And we do also support other developer tools like OpenXR, OpenGL, and DirectX. The display has been used in different verticals, but it's really for anyone who are creating assets in 3D that needs to have a better visualization of what they are creating. Think of the display as a VR without having to wear any VR headsets. We do have two models, the 27-inch that we just launched 2 weeks ago, and the 15.6 that is already available in the market since two to 3 years ago. We do have a space here where we are showing the display with different use cases. But one of the use cases that we are highlighting here is the usage on the virtual production environment, that we have a couple people here that can share their experience.
Thanks, Thais. Yes, absolutely. So let's dive in with how our guests here are working with and using this display. So first of all, Joe, thank you very much for stepping in at the last minute. We didn't even have time to update the slides, so it's really no exaggeration, I think, to say that Epic Games' Unreal Engine is, and all of the work that your team is doing, is at the heart of almost every virtual production volume. So can you tell us a little bit about the state of virtual production today and how you've seen spatial reality display being used?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, just walking around NAB, you can just see the amount of booths that have Unreal Engine on it. It's absolutely insane for us to kind of see the uptick that it's had. Talking about the display, we've had it in our LA lab for quite some time now, I think. I got a nice preview of it. Probably would have been about 7 or 8 months ago. And the way the team's using it is, yeah, it's kind of towards VR, but not inside the, like VR scouting without a headset. So it's more like a fantastic tool for the filmmakers who don't want to be kind of constrained inside one of those headsets. So that's kind of what we've been kind of seeing the use cases, asset review, and then virtual scouting locations, and that's kind of been the main area we've been using it for.
Great, great. No, that's good to hear. And yeah, let's drill down on this, as we go through the panel. So, Evan, your company is building these virtual production volumes all over the country, all over the world. And I know you've been a great evangelist for 3D in general and especially our 3D display. So we appreciate that. Tell us a little bit more about what you're working on and how you've seen the 3D display being used.
Absolutely. So our productions are done in a large-scale volume using camera tracking. So when our artists are developing content for our volume, it's incredibly powerful for us to have them have a secondary monitor where they can simulate the tracking motions that they're going to be experiencing on set and be able to design their environments for that camera tracking use case, as well as being able to see where shadows and top-down views and where things will sit in spatial location. But really, the other side of it as well is when you're trying to describe virtual production to someone that's never experienced the full sum of its parts, this screen can be used as a really base demonstration of what tracking and perspective content really means, and can help provide that aha moment for directors that have not had the opportunity to work on virtual stages. But really the biggest advantage comes to the creators of these environments and their ability to design in actual three-dimensional space without having to wear the headsets, because all design happening on 2D is really perspective and shading that gives the dimensionality. But with these monitors, our animators can work as if they're shooting with the camera and work in that three-dimensional space.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Evan. So AJ, you're using virtual production in Hollywood movies and a lot of content that even the general public would have heard about. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Magnobus is up to?
I don't know if I could talk about what Magnobus is currently up to.
Okay,
but,
what you can tell us.
We've been involved in virtual production since I think that term was coined. When we built the Lion King stage for virtual production, we used VR headsets as an avenue for our filmmakers to go into the worlds that they were shooting, right? The VR headset is a portal into the virtual space. It allows people and filmmakers, creatives, audiences, whoever, a chance to physically kind of enter the space. And what happens when you do that is as you move your head around inside the virtual space, you start to see parallax. Parallax is how two different objects in different depths will transition across each other. That really allows your brain to work in 3 dimensions, as opposed to traditional filmmaking, traditional previs, where you're looking at a 2D monitor. You have to kind of manipulate the scene to see 3D. Instantly, with very little friction, you can go into a 3D scene and see the world as it is laid out in 3 dimensions. That sparks a creative aspect of filmmaking that's collaborative and it's spatialized and it's all the things that you're used to from thousands of years of humans working in the 3D world. The spatial reality display is essentially all those benefits without needing to put on a germ-infested VR headset that is cumbersome. It's also, VR is like a little bit of a performative act, right? Like I put on a VR headset, I can't see you, but you can see me. I now have to perform for you, and there's a barrier there. There's a comfort barrier there when filmmakers are feeling like they're putting on a performance in front of their crews. This allows all of that to go away. And it basically sits on our stage as a window, as a portal into our 3D worlds that give our filmmakers a chance to really explore that space and find happenstance and find shots that they weren't really designing, but by looking at something, by moving their head around and seeing the world from a different angle, all of a sudden they're like, actually, I kind of like that. Let's put the camera over there and shoot that out. And that kind of really leads to a lot of the spontaneous actions of filmmakers. I had Rob Legato, a 4-time Oscar-winning visual effects supervisor, into our stage just on Friday, and I showed him the display, and he was instantly wowed by it. He was just completely stoked by being able to see inside the space and move his head around. He's like, why do I need VR anymore? This is that multiplied.
Yep.
So for us, it's been a game changer.
Fantastic. Great. Now, Chris, your company is doing something I think that is really innovative, using photogrammetry to create these virtual production backgrounds. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we developed a set of technologies and software pipeline that allows us to capture large real-world environments very quickly and then translate them into an environment that can be put on the virtual volume. And the spatial display gives us the ability to, from an artist perspective, look at the environment and see things that you couldn't normally see. Where I, in the past, would use VR, it's as the other panelists have said, very cumbersome, and it's not really something that you want to be constantly putting on and on because it's bulky, it's inconvenient. Whereas when you can just look at this display, it's there. But also that when you're dealing with producers, directors, DPs, that they're off-site, they don't want to be at the volume necessarily. They can have that experience, as AJ was saying, of being able to see what the shot's going to look like and be able to understand where their camera's going to be and how that's going to translate to the actual end plate. So that process is hugely useful.
Cool. That's right. That's really, and I hadn't seen anything like that from any other company before, and I think what you guys are doing is really the efficiency of using that for these large volumes. I think is a really cool innovation. So I'm going to go a little bit off script here because we haven't talked so much about virtual scouting and how important that is in this process. And when we first put the spatial reality display into the market, a lot of people came to us and said, "Oh yeah, this would be great for virtual scouting." And we kind of said, well, at least I said, "What is that? What does that mean?" So does anybody on the panel want to kind of take a crack at that?
Yeah, so one of the things that is commonplace is that producers and directors want to be able to see what they're going to be shooting at. And a lot of times the locations can be very far apart. And so by having these scale, like in our case, having these scans means that they can have that look, whether they're in Toronto, they're in Vancouver, they're in New York, they're in Tokyo, they can see the environment and be able to make decisions about whether or not it suits them almost instantaneously. And that really shortens the timeline between deciding what they want to shoot and actually these are the locations and locking them down.
When we do previs development for our feature films and for our filmmakers, we start in the 3D world, right? Everything starts in a 3D world. For LED walls or for previs, doesn't really matter. As we're starting to build the environment and we're starting to do virtual cinematography, we are scouting the film set just like you would scout a film set on a traditional production. In our world, we put meshes, we put 3D objects for the camera crane, the camera body, the dolly track, the lights inside the virtual space because it's a familiarity aspect for our filmmakers. By using the SRD as a virtual scouting tool, I can now see the film set laid out from a bird's eye perspective without needing to look only through the lens where I'm not seeing what's happening outside the frame of the camera. Now I can see the whole world as it's laid out, and I can say, oh, no, the pedestal for the crane actually shouldn't be here. The pedestal should be over here. The arm should be boomed this way. The dolly track is going the wrong direction. I can see all that without needing to look over the operator's shoulder at the Unreal scene. I can see that from the bird's eye perspective just by glancing over my shoulder, and that's a really powerful tool.
Well, and the ability for talent to also understand that same perspective is incredibly important. One of the big elements of virtual production success is managing the distance of your talent to the subject and the wall and the camera. So being able to visualize that in 3D and show that to talent so they can get a spatial recognition of that depth and understand where they need to be and when kind of goes to that fix it in pre that has come around through virtual production opposed to the fix it in post.
Yeah, and kind of the virtual scouting element, it allows these kind of smart people here to build tools inside the game engine so that they can actually kind of enhance what's happening for this crew who are used to kind of go into a physical location in the real world. They're actually now building this kind of gamified experience for them, which has more things that they could do that they couldn't do previously. That's where it becomes like super interesting. You start seeing all these playful interactions and the filmmakers having fun. And that's really kind of one of the huge benefits and joys that you get from this process as well. It's like you see people enjoying themselves in these environments again, and kind of as they're just kind of doing what could be a simple virtual scouting shoot, just trying to see where they're going to kind of place their volume, where they're going to kind of look to kind of start filming, and it's really a joy to watch. We've got some content online that we could point you guys towards as well, like just people jamming in these sessions, and it's a very interesting process.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the on-screen talent, they've never seen anything like this, and being able to experience that through a display that you just look at with your eyes rather than put on your head, that's important. But even the directors now, they're often people who are not familiar with a virtual production set. They may be great directors, but they've just never been into a virtual production set before, and the idea of putting something on your head is kind of foreign to them. So, I think that's helpful.
And Joe, I think the combination of the spatial reality display and the Unreal, especially on the Live Link tool, that's how they are using the virtual scouting. It's perfect because they can be in different locations with the same project, the same world, looking at the same scene and making the decisions as they wanted, according to the director's approach. So I think if you want to talk about the Live Link a little bit.
Sure. I think first thing I want to say as well is like we're bashing on kind of headsets a little bit here, but what's really good is you get the choice. You can do either.
Right. You could have both. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and you could be in the same session with somebody who's in one, like looking at the screen, and you have another person who's in the headset. So I think it's good to point out as well that like these multi-user sessions, you can have as many people in them, and you can pick and choose the way you want to kind of explore these worlds.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of fun and unique again, and the ways that you can really kind of allow the person to choose the direction that they want to go in with it.
And where does Live Link fit into this? How does that enable these multiple sessions?
I missed the start of what you said, sorry.
So the combination of the display and Live Link, because our display has an SDK running on Unreal, and most of the people doing virtual scouting with the display are using Live Link because they can connect into the same project simultaneously.
Yeah. On the multi-user session side, where people are all in
Exactly.
together. Yeah, correct. Then that's just where people can treat it as their virtual playground, and everyone's in together.
Well, because multi-user helps with the collaboration aspect, right?
Yep.
No one builds a movie in a sandbox by themselves. It's all about collaboration, and multi-user combined with Live Link helps kind of make that happen.
Yep.
Well, and then from the individual's perspective as well, they can, an artist working on an environment, they don't want to be repositioning their camera every time they want to see a different angle. It increases the amount of time on that they're working. Every artist wants to reduce the number of clicks that they're doing per day. So being able to have that Live Link so that you can get the real-time feedback from the monitor without having to manipulate your work interface is an incredibly powerful tool for you can be working on your environment, check it, go back to working on your environment without manipulating your cameras and perspectives and changing things around to try to see what object is behind that. Am I getting it in the shot? Instead, you have that Live Link control so that from your one workstation, you have your one monitor for your flat editing control and then one monitor for being able to see the spatial monitor, be able to see the true dimensionality of the work that you're trying to build for your productions.
And of course, there's nothing worse than trying to deal with your interface while also trying to deal with your 3D environment.
Exactly.
So now you can do both at the same
Yeah.
time
Exactly.
without having to switch, which, along with the clicks, it's also an amount of time to be able to, don the headset or whatever it is.
Nick, I wanted to go back to the question you asked about directors and getting into virtual production for the first time. There's like it's an imaginary barrier of like the unfamiliarity of virtual production and what that means to a filmmaker who spent their whole lives on a traditional film set. There's this skeuomorphic aspect of the tools that we build, which is based in reality, right?
Yeah.
I don't ever want to give my director a controller, like a gaming controller, because that's not what they're familiar with. They're not going to know how to move a camera with a gaming controller. Everything I give them has to look familiar to them from something they see on set. Everyone knows what a TV looks like. Everyone knows what a display looks like. Everyone knows how things in the real world when you move your head around, how they react. So that fits naturally into the skeuomorphic design for a stage, where it isn't something obscure and obtruse. It's actually something that's quite familiar, and it takes 0 time to understand.
So you'll connect up your Nodo wheels or something else that's a little bit more familiar. Yeah.
Well, I've always worked under the moniker of like what you read, you forget, what you see, you remember, and what you do, you understand. And being able to have this one display with one built-in object be able to explain the majority of what happens in virtual production with the tracking of perspective gives that gets understanding happening sooner.
Yeah, and for anybody here who hasn't seen the spatial reality display and experienced what we're talking about in terms of a display that you just look at with your eyes and the way that it tracks your head and changes the perspective, it's over there in the corner. So please, after this panel, of course, please go over and take a look.
And just to add to that, guesswork is expensive.
So, we could do this all day, and we love doing it. But does anybody in the audience have any questions? You're going to have to shout pretty loud for us to hear you. But anybody?
What's the price?
I'm sorry.
Oh, the price? Yeah, so we have 2 versions. One is the 27-inch, that is $5,000. And the smaller size, which is the 15.6, is $2,750.
The bigger one is worth it. It's easier to see. It's got more range. The bigger one is worth it.
Yeah, and I think one of the coolest thing is that once you're in the scene, once you're in the environment in front of the display, you are the camera. As you move, you are setting the camera angle for your viewing point. So this is something that a lot of people they impressed when they see it. Something that they were not expecting that you can see it.
And one thing to add there, that although it is expensive, that the first time I used it, I put one of my models onto the screen and instantly saw things that I hadn't seen on a model that I've been working on for hours. And that amount of time that it took me to, okay, now I see that, fix that, go back, and it's going to save both myself time and my customer money.
And clicks.
Cool, excellent. Any more questions, comments?
So if they're available now, yes, the 15.6 is available now, and the 27-inch you can pre-order on B&H, and we are going to start shipping around May timing. All right. I think we talked a lot about the virtual production as part of the pre-production use case, but also during the production, it can also be used as well as on the post-production to preview what they recorded during the virtual production environment. I don't know if anyone want to talk about that.
Well, I can mention something on that. Volumetric capture and mocap is something that's absolutely becoming a big prevalent part of virtual production and the integration of virtual actors and virtual extras, and being able to utilize that same data to translate into capturing a person in a space and immediately seeing how that's going to translate into a virtual world is an incredibly powerful tool for pre and post-production.
Yeah, we have a demo on our booth, which is from a company called Digital Nation Entertainment. They are using our display, in fact, as part of the real-time visualization. So when a person is on a volumetric rig, they can preview in real time using LiveLink on our display to really have this visualization in 3D, and it helps to optimize the time that the person is on the rig because they know exactly what are the shots they are capturing. So some of the contents you can see that. You can also, one of the demos we did is a volumetric captured person, and then they added CG on the background. So it creates this type of depth of the content.
Yeah, it's funny because depth works both directions, right? So when you have a 3D asset like a character who sticks out of the screen at you, it's more of like a music box kind of experience, and it's like a turntable. But then you have these environments that are depth inwards, where you can start to see how they react when you have things in front of them. And the great thing about the display is it does both.
Yeah, being able to visualize the horizon line and actually be able to dip down and see where your depth of your environment is an incredibly powerful element to the screens.
And being able to judge parallax as well. that, is that thing actually going to become visible or not visible? Now you can see that and make that decision before you actually have actors in front of the stage.
Yeah, I can see, talking about kind of scans for MetaHuman as well, I think it could be a really useful tool for kind of when you're sculpting and getting to that point where you're getting used to kind of all the little fine hair details, just to have that depth just gives that real nice pop.
Fantastic. Okay, this is great. Any more questions? We've had some great questions. Any more questions from anyone? If not, then I want to say thank you very much to all of our panelists for being here today and taking time out of your busy schedules. Some at very, very last minute, so thank you, Joe.
Yeah, for sure.
And thanks everyone. And I believe this panel will also be available on demand for anybody who missed it. Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.